North Korea fired yet another ballistic missile overnight, part of an escalating series of tests. The newest missile was launched from the country's east coast. It flew about 280 miles before landing in the sea off the coast of Japan. The White House says President Trump has been briefed but has no other comment. Ben Tracy is in Beijing with the rising tensions in the region. Ben, good morning.
Good morning. This missile launched by North Korea appears to be a short-range ballistic Scud missile, and Japan says it could have easily hit an airplane or a ship in the area. So if anyone thought that pressure from the U.S. or even China would have slowed down North Korea's missile tests, that appears to be wishful thinking. North Korea has now conducted 9 missile launches this year, 3 in just the past 3 weeks. The latest comes after the country claimed its leader, Kim Jong-un, oversaw a successful test of a new anti-aircraft system this past weekend. Japan was quick to condemn the new missile launch, as was South Korea, whose new president has said he wants better relations with North Korea. Despite international sanctions, North Korea's capabilities continue to grow. Last week, the country said it perfected a medium-range solid-fuel missile that it would start mass producing. And earlier this month, it tested what is believed to be its longest-range missile yet, potentially capable of carrying a nuclear warhead, but still not able to reach the United States.
Ignition.
2014 was the last time the U.S. tested its West Coast Missile Defense System, which has only worked in about half of the trials. On Tuesday, the U.S. military will attempt to shoot down an intercontinental ballistic missile for the first time.
U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis has warned of grave consequences if diplomatic efforts to ease tensions between Washington and Pyongyang fail. He also expressed concerns over North Korea's growing missile capabilities. Yoo Jun-hee has this report.
In an interview that aired on CBS on Sunday, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis warned a potential military conflict with North Korea would be, quote, catastrophic. Pointing to North Korea's potent arsenal of tube artillery and rocket launchers that have Seoul within striking range, he said a war in the peninsula will likely be the worst kind of fighting many people will ever see in their lifetimes. Mattis also expressed concern over North Korea's ICBM capabilities, believing the country's arsenal was improving with every test and that it posed a direct threat to the United States. Mattis refused to comment in detail when asked if there was a theoretical red line or a point of no return for North Korea that would force the U.S. to intervene militarily. Pyongyang has already conducted 9 ballistic missile tests so far this year, with the latest one occurring early Monday morning. The latest launch follows the regime's testing of a KN-06 surface-to-air missile on Sunday, under the supervision of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Pyongyang state media claimed it was a success, saying the missile's capabilities have been upgraded since last year. Kim Jong-un reportedly gave orders that the missile be mass-produced and deployed immediately. As it prepares for North Korea's growing threat, the Pentagon is scheduled to conduct a test of its missile defense system on Tuesday, where it will attempt to shoot down a mock ICBM. While President Trump has said he prefers a diplomatic solution, he also warned that a major conflict was possible between North Korea and the United States.
Japan is set to put 3 more satellites into orbit for its new homegrown GPS system, and they come with defences against North Korean meddling. The Japanese daily Sankei Shimbun reports that the Michibiki satellite number 2, set to launch next month, is equipped with technology to protect it from attempts by North Korea to use signals to jam it. The system will serve as a complement to the existing GPS operated by the United States. Michibiki satellites 3 and 4 will be launched later this year. Japan plans to use the technology for a wide range of purposes, including smartphone applications and navigation systems during the 2020 Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo.
The G7 summit in Italy last week seems to have left a bitter taste in Angela Merkel's mouth, and not even German beer could wash it away. At a campaign rally on Sunday, the German chancellor revealed her vision for Europe's future.
The times in which we can fully count on others are to some extent over, as I have experienced in the past few days. That is why I can only say we Europeans must really take our destiny into our own hands.
It's a future without the UK, which has been negotiating its exit from the EU since the end of March. Merkel also suggested that Europe could no longer count on another longtime ally, the United States. At last week's G7 meeting, U.S. President Donald Trump continued to distance himself from allies, particularly on the issue of climate. In an unprecedented move, the U.S. did not sign a joint statement made by all 6 other nations, reaffirming their commitment to fight climate change. On Saturday, Trump tweeted that he'd decide in the coming days whether to pull the U.S. from the Paris climate deal. The U.S. president's apparent indifference towards European allies was palpable during his first foreign trip. During a speech by the Italian Prime Minister, Trump appeared not to be wearing a translation device. Earlier in the week, Trump gave a speech to NATO allies where he made no explicit reference to the U.S.'s support for Article 5, NATO's mutual defense guarantee. For Merkel, that means Europe must now decide how to navigate in the era of America First.
CNN has reported that on Monday, Britain reacted to Angela Merkel's assertion that Germany could no longer completely depend on its traditional allies. Britain said it would continue to seek a deep and special partnership with Germany and the rest of Europe after Brexit. Speaking less than 24 hours after the German Chancellor appeared to call Europe's relationship with the UK and the United States into question, Home Secretary Amber Rudd said Britain hopes to remain a close ally of the European Union once the UK withdraws from the bloc in 2 years' time.
Demonstrators have been gathering in Paris to voice their opposition to the visit of Russian President Vladimir Putin, who will be the first foreign leader to visit France's new president, Emmanuel Macron. Many expressed anger at Russia's actions in Ukraine and Syria, and called on France to maintain or even stiffen sanctions against Moscow. At the G7, Macron showed he was determined to be no pushover where President Donald Trump is concerned. But it remains to be seen if he will take a similar line with Putin. Macron has previously said he sees no reason to relax sanctions until Russia respects the terms of the Minsk Accord. North Korea, Libya, the future of the European Union and bilateral relations are also on the agenda, which the two men will discuss in the gilded splendor of the Palais of Versailles.
Roads out of the Philippine city of Marawi have been overflowing with evacuees as government troops battle militants sympathetic to the self-proclaimed Islamic State. Most of the city's population of 200,000 have left, many pouring into Iligan, about 40 kilometers to the north, where the authorities say they're stretched to the limit. There are fears that extremists have also left Marawi and are blending in with civilians, possibly with the intention of launching attacks. Dozens of people, militants, troops and civilians have been killed since last Tuesday when rebels from the Maute group went on the rampage. Witnesses said they saw militants flying the ISIL flag and wearing its black outfits. The violence followed a failed attempt by the military to arrest a rebel leader thought to be a key recruiter for ISIL in the Philippines. The resistance the fighters are putting up is adding to fears that the group's radical ideology is spreading in the southern Philippines, which could become a haven for militants from Indonesia, Malaysia and beyond.
Rodrigo Duterte is gearing himself up for a showdown. This time it's the Supreme Court and Congress that threaten to stand in the way of the outspoken leader of the Philippines. Duterte imposed martial law across the southern third of the country last Tuesday. It follows violent clashes in the region of Mindanao between security forces and militants, who Duterte claims are fighting for Islamic State group. He's vowed to press ahead with the move, despite signs of opposition.
Until the police and the armed forces say the Philippines is safe, this martial law will continue. I will not listen to the others. The Supreme Court, Congress, they don't matter.
Martial law gives the military power over civilian authorities. It means that armed forces can conduct searches or carry out arrests without a warrant. The ruling also applies curfews for some of Mindanao's provinces. Under the Constitution, Congress has the authority to extend the decree. The Supreme Court also has the power to rule on the law's legality. Those checks and balances are designed to prevent a repeat of the abuses suffered under Ferdinand Marcos. The former dictator was overthrown in 1986, 1 year before the current constitution was drawn up. Duterte is unlikely to face opposition in Congress, but getting his project past the Supreme Court could prove trickier. Last Friday, the court's Chief Justice expressed concerns about Duterte's decision to impose martial law.
it's because of their marginalization and the difficulties with them to succeed because they're African Muslims.
At 6 p.m. this afternoon, the government of Trinidad and Tobago was overthrown.
The Africans are going to go in a pool of unemployment, nothing. They just sit in the ghetto and do nothing, and then the drugs come in, you know, and it's a haven for the drugs. And now the guns are in, so the murder rate is just spiraling out of control.
Schools with kids and gardens and a society that is operating by Islamic law, that would interest a Muslim individual. I think some people feel as though there is no hope almost in changing the political system that exists here.
Most of them were just gang members making a couple hundred TT dollars. They saw this as an opportunity to make $1,000 US a month. So it is more of these individuals becoming mercenaries rather than a radical religious belief. We're going to keep you back there in hell, and you're going to be killed or you're going to die in Syria.
In its 8th month, Iraqi armed forces are continuing their operation to retake the northern city of Mosul. These are live pictures where black smoke is seen rising from the last Daesh-controlled area. Iraqi counter-terrorism troops say dozens of civilians have been escorted to safety.
We've been trapped for several days with no food, no water.
Across the border in Syria, at least 35 civilians have been killed by US-led strikes and shelling by the Syrian Democratic Forces. Monitoring groups say the deaths occurred in Raqqa, where forces are trying to drive Daesh out of its stronghold. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, more than 300 civilians have been killed in coalition airstrikes since late April. The US Defense Secretary James Mattis was asked about civilian casualties in the fight against Daesh on a national US news program.
Civilian casualties are a fact of life in this sort of situation. We do everything humanly possible, unlike our enemy, unlike our adversary, whether it be Lebanese Hezbollah and the way they fought against the Israelis, we've seen that, or you look at ISIS and their fight against the international community. No matter where you find these terrorists, Al-Qaeda, they have a callous disregard for human life, for civilian life.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Chain will host women-only showings for the upcoming Wonder Woman film, and some men aren't happy about it. The Alamo Drafthouse Cinemas in New York City and Austin invited only women and those who identify as women to select screenings starting June 4th. Even the theater staff will be all women. That didn't sit well with some men moviegoers who used social media to air their grievances. Some claimed it was discrimination and asked when all men screenings of other upcoming movies would take place. But does a woman-only showing qualify as discrimination? Probably not. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits sex-based discrimination as far as equal opportunity employment, but discrimination based on sex doesn't extend to public accommodations like hotels, theaters, and restaurants. And the Alamo isn't banning all men from the theater, just a handful of select screenings, so critics aren't likely to take their complaints to court anytime soon.
Meanwhile, back here at home, there was a big scare at one of our country's busiest airports. a suspicious package that turned out to be a pressure cooker. Well, that forced the entire terminal at the Newark International Airport, Terminal A, to evacuate. And it happened on one of the busiest travel weekends of the year. With a heightened security presence around the country, what does that mean? Brian Yennis is live from another site with heightened security for the weekend. That's Times Square, which was targeted by a jihadist who, you may remember, tried to set off a car bomb in his van in Times Square 7 years ago. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Eric, and you'll remember 7 years ago in 2010, just 3 blocks behind me, that terrorist tried to light the device. It did light, but did not explode, luckily. And it was only because 2 street vendors alerted police that they were able to stop that situation from potentially being catastrophic. And that is really what the DHS and security forces and police officers are saying is stay vigilant out there this holiday weekend. And that's what happened yesterday at Newark Airport. Terminal A partially evacuated after a pressure cooker was found in a brown bag next to a trash can there. It was not an explosive device, but some sources telling the New York Post they are worried that perhaps this was a so-called dry run, maybe testing security, but again, not an explosive device yesterday. Meanwhile, airport security is a primary focus here this entire weekend, particularly because you'll remember the DHS set an electronic device ban, a large electronic device ban for 10 airports coming out of the Middle East, meaning all devices larger than a cell phone had to be checked. Well, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly told our Chris Wallace today that he is thinking about that they might expand that ban to include all international flights to and from the United States.
We're going to raise the bar for, generally speaking, aviation security much higher than it is now. It is a real sophisticated threat, and I'll reserve that decision until we see where it's going.
CNN has reported that the Red Cross said Monday that Sri Lanka remains in the grips of the worst flooding in 14 years, and the bad weather that has killed more than 160 people is expected to continue. The flooding was brought on by monsoon rains across southwestern portions of the country. As many as 112 people are still missing, and the death toll is expected to rise as authorities battle to rescue those still stranded and warn of the possibility of crocodile attacks. About 500,000 people have been affected. India and other countries have sent aid.
Reuters has reported that an intensifying cyclone churned north toward Bangladesh on Monday after heavy rain in Sri Lanka and thunderstorms in eastern India killed almost 200 people. Impoverished Bangladesh, hit by cyclones every year, warned that some low-lying coastal areas were likely to be inundated by a storm surge of 4 to 5 feet above normal and raised the storm danger signal on a scale of 1 to 10 to 7. Cyclone Mora was expected to make landfall on Tuesday morning. Floods and landslides in tropical Sri Lanka off India's southern tip have killed at least 169 people in recent days, and 24 people have been killed in storms in the eastern Indian state of Bihar, either by lightning strikes or under collapsed village huts.